Hi everyone, I'm Doc Ken and welcome to Chapter 5 entitled Ecology, Preserving the Animal Kingdom and Their Abiotic Environment. So what are the learning outcomes for this chapter? One is to define population. Two, enumerate interspecific interactions among animals. Three, give the unique attributes of communities. And lastly, to demonstrate actions to resolve ecological problems. First, let's talk about ecology. Ecology is the study of the relationships between living organisms, including humans, and their physical environment. It seeks to understand the vital connections between plants and animals and the world around them. Next, biosphere. The biosphere is made up of parts of Earth where life exists. The biosphere is a global ecosystem composed of living organisms and the abiotic factors from which they derive energy and nutrients. Next, biome. Biome is a collection of plants and animals that have common characteristics for the environment they exist in. They can be found over a range of continents. Biomes are distinct biological communities that have formed in response to a shared physical climate. The five major types of biomes are aquatic, grassland, forest, desert, and tundra. Let's now move on to the two factors of biosphere. We have biotic factor and abiotic factor. Biotic and abiotic are the two essential factors responsible for shaping the ecosystem. Biotic components are the living things that have a direct or indirect influence on other organisms in an environment. Biotic describes a living component of an ecosystem, for example, organisms such as plants and animals. Abiotic components are non-living chemical and physical factors in the environment which affect ecosystem. Examples: water, light, wind, soil, humidity, minerals, and gases. Sunlight is an example of a biotic factor which affects the ecosystem. Sunlight is a major part of abiotic conditions in an ecosystem. The sun is the primary source of energy on our planet. Plants need sunlight to grow. Animals, including humans, need plants for food and the oxygen they produce. Without heat from the sun, Earth would freeze. There would be no winds, ocean currents, or clouds to transport water. Of all the sun's energy, less than 1% of it's actually used by living things. Let's now move on to the different factors of ecosystem. 1. Species. Species is a group of living organisms consisting of similar individuals capable of exchanging genes or interbreeding. Next, population. A population is defined as a group of individuals of the same species living in an interbreeding within a given area. Members of a population often rely on the same resources, are subject to similar environment constraints, and depend on the availability of other members to persist over time. Community. In ecology, a community is a group or association of populations of two or more different species occupying the same geographical area at the same time. Next, habitat. A habitat is a place where an organism makes its home. A habitat meets all the environmental conditions an organism needs to survive. Next, niche. Niche in ecology, all of the interactions of a species with other members of its community including other types of ecological relationship. Each of the various species that constitute a community occupies its own ecological niche. Informally, a niche is considered the job or role that a species performs within the nature. Let's now move on to the types of biotic factors according to ecological niche. Organisms are characterized into two broad categories based upon how they obtain their energy and nutrients: autotrophs and heterotrophs. Autotrophs are known as producers because they're able to make their own food from raw materials and energy. Examples include plants and algae. Heterotrophs are known as consumers because they consume producers or other consumers. Dogs, birds, fish, and humans are all examples of heterotrophs. Animals of all sorts live together in various ecosystems. Within these natural communities, the animals eat specific diets that connect them together in a food chain. The balance of an ecosystem depends on the presence of every type of animal. If one type of animal becomes too numerous, the entire balance of ecosystem will change. We have types of heterotrophs. We have herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, detritivores, and lastly, we have decomposers. First, let's talk about herbivores. Herbivores are animals whose primary food source is plant-based. Examples of herbivores are rabbit, deer, grasshopper, cow, and goat. These animals have evolved digestive systems capable of handling large amounts of plant materials. Herbivores can be further classified into frugivores, fruit eaters, granivores, seed eaters, nectivores, nectar feeders, and folivores, leaf eaters. 9. Carnivores. Carnivores are animals that eat other animals. The word carnivore is derived from Latin and literally means meat eater. Lions, tigers, snakes, eagles, and sharks are good examples of these heterotrophs. Next, we have omnivores. Omnivores are animals that eat both plant and animal derived food. In Latin, omnivore means to eat everything. Humans, bears, and chickens are examples of vertebrate omnivores. Invertebrate omnivores include cockroaches and crayfish. Detritivores. A detritivore is a heterotrophic organism which obtains its nutrients by feeding on detritus. Detritus is the organic matter made up of dead plant and animal material. Detritivores are organisms that feed on the organic waste of dead plants and animals. Examples are earthworms, crabs, and snails. And lastly, decomposers. Decomposers are also called as reducers because they are able to break down or degrade the dead bodies of organisms, and due to their small size, they are known as microconsumers. Examples are bacteria and fungi. Let's now proceed to ecological relationship. Ecological relationships describe the interactions between and among organisms within their environment. And these interactions may have positive, negative, or neutral effects on either species' ability to survive and reproduce or fitness. By classifying these effects, ecologists have derived six major types of species interactions. We have mutualism, we have commensalism, parasitism, predation, competition, and lastly, we have cooperation. First, let's talk about mutualism. Mutualism describes an interaction that benefits both species. A well-known example exists in the mutualistic relationship between the bees and flowers. In this mutualistic relationship, the bees get to eat and the flowering plants get to reproduce. Another examples are algae and spider crab, and the bacteria and human. The algae gets a good place to live, and the crab gets camouflage, and the bacteria benefited by getting food, and the human benefits by being able to digest the foods they eat. Next, commensalism. An interaction where one species benefits and the other remains unaffected is known as commensalism. Example, orchid and tree. The orchid is benefited because it is able to grow in a suitable location, while the tree is not affected. Next ecological relationship, parasitism. Parasitism is a symbiotic relationship between species where one organism, the parasites, lives on or inside another organism, the host, causing it some harm, and it's adapted structurally to this way of life. Example of this are tapeworm in man and mosquito in man. One organism that is benefited and the other is harmed. Let's now proceed to predation. Predation is a biological interaction where one organism, the predator, kills and eats another organism, its prey. An example of this when lion, which is the predator, eats the deer, which refer to its prey. Another example is between chicken and worm. Next, competition. Competition is an interaction between organisms or species in which both the organisms or species are harmed. Limited supply of at least one resource, such as food, water, and territory, used by both can be a factor of competition. Examples, bangus and tilapia, and lion and tiger. And lastly, we have cooperation. Cooperation is the process where groups of organisms work or act together for common or mutual benefits. A good example of this is the colony of ants. Cooperation can be seen in many animals, birds, and fish. Many birds, fish, and grazing animals form groups as a defense against predators.